Sam C. Hey guys, here we go. Story time with Dora. What are we doing? Oh, the time machine, part 11. How about this drive, Sam C? What's going on there, buddy? Well, I think we just gonna go cruising around Arches and do some kind of a spinny zip-diddy-doo 360 video and read a little story. So, this story, now where we left things off, he had taken Weena, and it was over at the jade porcelain, something like that, place palace, and they hadn't seen the Morlocks yet, but so far I had not seen nothing of the Morlocks. But it was yet early in the night, and the darker hours before the old moon rose were still to come. So they're on the new moon, the dark nights that Weena always was telling him to worry about, and he couldn't figure out why. But now he knows why. And so here we go then. From the brow of the next hill, I saw a thick wood spreading wide and black before me. I hesitated at this. I could see no end to it, either to the right or the left. Feeling tired, my feet in particular were very sore. I carefully lowered Weena from my shoulders as I halted and sat down upon the turf. I could no longer see the palace of green porcelain, and I was in doubt of my direction. I looked into the thickness of the wood and thought of what it might hide. Under that dense tangle of branches, one would be out of sight of the stars. Even were there no other lurking danger, a danger I did not care to let my imagination loose upon, there would still be all the roots to stumble over, and the tree boles to strike against. I was very tired, too, after the excitements of the day, so I decided that I would not face it, but would pass the night upon the open hill. Weena, I was glad to find, was fast asleep. I carefully wrapped her in my jacket and sat down beside her to wait for the moonrise. The hillside was quiet and deserted, but from the black of the wood there came now and then a stir of living things. Above me shone the stars, for the night was very clear. I felt a certain sense of friendly comfort in their twinkling. All the old constellations had gone from the sky, however. That slow movement which is imperceptible in 100 human lifetimes had long since rearranged them in unfamiliar groupings. But the Milky Way, it seemed to me, was still the same, tattered streamer of stardust as of yore. Southward, as I judged it, was a very bright red star that was new to me. It was even more splendid than our own green Sirius. And amid all these scintillating points of light, one bright planet shone kindly and steadily like the face of an old friend. Looking at these stars suddenly dwarfed my own troubles and all the gravities of terrestrial life. I thought of their unfathomable distance and the slow, inevitable drift of their movements out of the unknown past and into the unknown future. I thought of the great precessional cycle that the pole of the earth describes. Only 40 times had that silent revolution occurred during all the years that I had traversed. And during these few revolutions, all the activity all the traditions, the complex organizations, the nations, languages, literatures, aspirations, even the mere memory of man as I knew him, had been swept out of existence. Instead were these frail creatures who had forgotten their high ancestry and the white things of which I went in terror. Then I thought of the great fear that was between the two species, and for the first time, with a sudden shiver, came the clear knowledge of what the meat I had seen might be. Yet it was too horrible. I looked at little Weena sleeping beside me, her face white and star-like under the stars, and forthwith dismissed the thought. Through that long night I held my mind off the Morlocks as well I could, and whiled away the time by trying to fancy I could find signs of the old constellations in the new confusion. The sky kept very clear, except for a hazy cloud or so. No doubt I dozed at times. Then, as my vigil wore on, came a faintness in the eastward sky, like the reflection of some colorless fire, and the old moon rose, thin and peaked and white, and close behind, and overtaking it, and overflowing it, the dawn came, pale at first, and growing pink and warm. No Morlocks had approached us. Indeed, I had seen none upon the hill that night, and in the confidence of renewed day, it almost seemed to me that my fear had been unreasonable. I stood up and found my foot with a loose heel swollen at the ankle and painful under the heel. So I sat down again, took off my shoes, and flung them away. Let's just take a peek and see what we're doing here on this here video. Oh yeah, we dipped off the road there to get a little just a moment of peace from the amount of traffic. There was a lot of traffic going on. Arches is a busy place, and this was not during one of those timed entry things. So you can see how chaotic it gets. And some of the, over at Windows, it's just a drive-through parking lot. And there's just people doing laps, trying to find parking. So, yeah, they had to do something. So, yeah, there you go. Anyway, oh, yeah, we're going to spin. Show me that 360 action. Oh, I lost my space. Good Lord. Okay, here we go. Although it was a long night, I held off the Morlocks as well as I could. Oh yeah, here we go. And he threw away his shoes because they was broken anyway. I awakened Weena and went down into the wood, now green and pleasant instead of black and foreboding. We found some fruit wherewith to break our fast. We soon met others of the dainty ones, laughing and dancing in the sunlight, as though there was no such thing in nature as the night. And then I thought once more of the meat that I had seen. I felt assured now of what it was, and from the bottom of my heart I pitied this last feeble rill from the great flood of humanity. Clearly, at some time in the long ago of human decay, the Morlocks' food had run short. Possibly they had lived on rats and such like vermin. Even now, man is far less discriminating and exclusive in his food than he was. Far less than any monkey. His prejudice against human flesh is no deep-seated instinct, and so these inhuman sons of men I tried to look at the thing in a scientific spirit. After all, they were less human and more remote than our cannibal ancestors of 3 or 4 thousand years ago. And the intelligence that would have made this state of things a torment had gone. Why should I trouble myself? These Eloi were mere fatted cattle, which the ant-like Morlocks preserved and preyed upon, probably saw to the breeding of. And there was Weena dancing at my side. Then I tried to preserve myself from the horror that was coming upon me by regarding it as a rigorous punishment of human selfishness. Man had been content to live in ease and delight upon the labors of his fellow man, had taken necessity as his watchlord and excuse, and in the fullness of time necessity had come home to him. I even tried a Carlyle-like scorn of this wretched aristocracy or in decay, but this attitude of mine was impossible. However great their intellectual degradation, the Eloi had kept too much of the human form not to claim my sympathy, and to make me perforce a sharer in their degradation and their fear. I had at the time very vague ideas as to the course I should pursue. My first was to secure some safe place for refuge, and to make myself such arms of metal or stone as I could contrive. The necessity was immediate. In the next place, I hoped to procure some means of fire, so that I could have the weapon of a torch at hand, for nothing I knew would be more efficient against these Morlocks. Then I wanted to arrange some contrivance to break open the doors of the bronze under the white sphinx. I had in mind a battering ram. I had a persuasion that if I could enter those doors and carry a blaze of light before me, I should discover the time machine and escape. I could not imagine the Morlocks were strong enough to move it far away. Weena I had resolved to bring with me to our time, and turning such schemes over in my mind, I pursued our way towards the building with my fancy had chosen as our dwelling. Ooh, that's chapter 7, down and out. Chapter 8. Let's just take a look and see what we're doing here. Oh, we're still doing all right, just kind of spinning, doing a loop-de-loo. It sure is pretty there, and if you can go at the right time of year, you know, there's a time of year when it's too cold for some and not cold enough for others, and you kind of get a better shot. This time of the year right here was not one of the better ones. It was a little bit busy, as you will see coming up here. All right, chapter 8. I found the palace of green porcelain. When we approached it, about noon, deserted and falling into ruin. Only ragged vestiges of glass remained in its windows, and great sheets of the green facing had fallen away from the corroded metal framework. It lay very high upon a turfy down, and looking northeastward before I entered it, I was surprised to see a large estuary or even creek, where I judged Wandsworth and Battersea must have once been. I thought then, though I never followed up the thought, of what might have happened or might be happening to the living things in the sea. The material of the palace proved on examination to be indeed porcelain, and along the face of it I saw an inscription in some unknown character. I thought, rather foolishly, that Weena might help me to interpret this, but I only learned that the bare idea of writing had never entered her head. She always seemed to me, I fancy, more human than she was, perhaps because of her affection was so human. With the big valves of the door, which were open and broken, we found, instead of the customary hall, a long gallery lit by many side windows. At the first glance, it was reminded of a museum. The tile floor was thick with dust, and a remarkable array of miscellaneous objects were shrouded in some gray covering. Then I perceived, standing strange and gaunt in the center of the hall, what was clearly the lower part of a huge skeleton. I recognized by the oblique feet that it was some extinct creature after the fashion of the Megatherium. Don't think that's pronounced correctly. The skull and the upper bones lay beside it in the thick dust, and in one place, where rainwater had dropped through the leak in the roof, the thing itself had been worn away. Further into the gallery was a huge skeleton barrel of a brontosaurus. My museum hypothesis was confirmed. Going towards the side, I found what appeared to be sloping shelves, and clearing away the dust, I found the old familiar glass cases of our own time. But they must have been airtight, to judge from the fair preservation of some of their contents. Oh, let's just take a peeky-boo at this little drive here. Oh, I know where we at. We sneaking in on the windows here. And this, oh boy, this takes a while to get through this one. And, yeah, it's just busy. It's a busy place. There's a reason why they went to that timed entry thing. You may not like it, but you're certainly not going to like sitting in this line and waiting to do nothing either. So choose your dislikes, I guess. All right, here we go. So okay, so we're in an old museum. That's what the porcelain place is. Well, clearly we stood among the ruins of some latter-day South Kensington. Here, apparently, was the paleontological section, and a very splendid array of fossils it must have been. Though the inevitable process of decay that had been staved off for time, and had, through the extinction of bacteria and fungi, lost 99 hundredths of its force, was nevertheless, with extreme sureness, if with extreme slowness, at work again upon all its treasures. Here and there I found traces of the little people, in the shape of rare fossils, broken to pieces, or threaded in strings upon reeds, and the cases had, in some instances, been bodily removed by the Morlocks, as I judged. The place was very silent. The thick dust deadened our footsteps. Weena, who had been rolling a sea urchin down the sloping grass of a case, presently came as I stared about me, and very quietly took my hand and stood beside me. And at first I was so much surprised by this ancient monument of an intellectual age that I gave no thought to the possibilities it presented. Even my preoccupation about the time machine receded a little from my mind. To judge from the size of this place, this palace of green porcelain had a great deal more in it than a gallery of paleontology, perhaps historical galleries. It might be even a library. To me, at least in my present circumstances, these would be vastly more interesting than this spectacle of old-time geology in decay. Exploring, I found another short gallery running transversely to the first. This appeared to be devoted to minerals, and the sight of a block of sulfur set my mind running on gunpowder. But I could find no saltpeter. Indeed, no nitrates of any kind. Doubtless they had Delix something ages ago. Yet the sulfur hung in my mind, and set up a train of thinking. As for the rest of the contents of that gallery, though on the whole they were the best preserved of all I saw, I had little interest. I am no specialist in mineralogy, and I went on down a very ruinous aisle running parallel to the first hall as I entered. Apparently, this section had been devoted to natural history, but everything had long since passed out of recognition. A few shriveled and blackened vestiges of what had once been stuffed animals, desiccated mummies in jars that had once held spirit, a brown dust of departed plants, that was all. I was sorry for that, because I should have been glad to trace the patient readjustments by which the conquest of animated nature had been attained. Then we came to a gallery of simply colossal proportions, but singularly ill lit, the floor of it running downward at a slight angle from the end at which I entered. At intervals, white globes hung from the ceiling, many of them cracked and smashed, which suggested that originally the place had been artificially lit. Let's take a look. Let's take a look and see if we've through the parking lot of windows yet. And no, of course we are not. We haven't even made it halfway to the latrines yet, but there's windows. You could get out and go hike it if you had somebody who wanted to keep driving. And I think that's what happened, because there were people doing laps in there. And I know they're looking for a parking spot, but I'm betting the rest of the people in their crew went to go and take their pictures and stuff. And that's what the driver ended up doing. All right, let's get back to this story. Now, where the heck was I? Oh, boy. Yeah, I lost my spot. Well, gunpowder, yeah, that's long good. Yeah, shriveled, Artificially lit. There we go. I think he might be going into the underground garage. Okay. Originally, the place had been artificially lit. Here I was more in my element, for rising on either side of me were the huge bulks of big machines, all greatly corroded and many broken down, but some still fairly complete. You know, I have a certain weakness for mechanism, and I was inclined to linger among these, the more so as for the most part they had the interest of puzzles, and I could make only the vaguest guesses at what they were for. I fancied that if I could solve their puzzles, I should find myself in possession of powers that might be of use against the Morlocks. Woo! Oh, yeah, we moving through. I think Doppler might have dropped a mix from here. One at least. Suddenly, Weena came very close to my side, so suddenly that she startled me. Had it not been for her, I do not think I should have noticed that the floor of the gallery sloped at all. The end I had come in at was quite above ground, and was lit by rare slit-like windows. As you went down the length, the ground came up against these windows, until at last there was a pit-like the area of a London house before each, the only narrow line of daylight at the top. I went slowly along, puzzling about the machines, and had been too intent upon them to notice the gradual diminution of the light, until Weena's increasing apprehensions drew my attention. Then I saw that the gallery ran down at last into a thick darkness. I hesitated, and then, as I looked round me, I saw that the dust was less abundant, and its surface even less. Further away, towards the dimness, it appeared to be broken by a number of small, narrow footprints. My sense of the immediate presence of the Morlocks revived at that. I felt that I was wasting my time in the academic examination of machinery. I called to mind that it was already far advanced in the afternoon, and that I had still no weapon, no refuge, and no means of making a fire. And then, down in the remote blackness of the gallery, I heard a peculiar pattering, and the same odd noises I had heard down the well. I took Weena's hand. Then, struck with a sudden idea, I left her and turned to a machine from which I projected a lever not unlike those in a signal box. Clambering upon the stand and grasping this lever in my hands, I put all my weight upon it sideways. Suddenly, Weena, deserted in the central aisle, began to whimper. I had judged the strength of the lever pretty correctly, for it snapped after a minute's strain, and I rejoined her with a mace in my hand, more than sufficient, I judged, for any Morlock skull I might encounter. And I longed very much to kill a Morlock or so. Very inhuman, you may think, to want to go killing one's own descendants, but it was impossible, somehow, to feel any humanity in the things. Only my disinclination to leave Weena, and a persuasion that if I began to slack at my thirst for murder, my time machine might suffer, restrained me from going straight down the gallery and killing the brutes I heard. Well, mace in one hand and Weena in the other, I went out of that gallery and into another, and still larger one, which at first glance reminded me of a military chapel hung with tattered flags. The brown and charred rags that hung from the sides of it I presently recognized as the decaying vestiges of books. They had long since dropped to pieces, and every semblance of print had left them. But here and there were warped boards and cracked metallic clasps that told the tale well enough. Had I been a literary man, I might, perhaps, have moralized upon the futility of all ambition. But as it was, the thing that struck me with the keenest force was the enormous waste of labor to which this somber wilderness of rotting paper testified. At the time, I will confess that I thought chiefly of the philosophical transactions and my own 17 papers upon physical optics. Then Going up a broad staircase, we came to what may once have been a gallery of technical chemistry, and here I had not a little hope of useful discoveries, except at one end where the roof had collapsed. This gallery was well preserved. I went eagerly to every unbroken case, and at last, in one of the really airtight cases, I found a box of matches. I eagerly tried them. They were perfectly good. They were not even damp. I turned to Weena. "Dance!" I cried to her in her own tongue, for now I had a weapon indeed against the horrible creatures we feared. And so, in that derelict museum, upon a thick, soft carpeting of dust, to Weena's huge delight, I solemnly performed a kind of composite dance, whilst whistling "The Land of the Leal" as cheerfully as I could. In part, it was a modest can-can, in part a step dance, in part a skirt dance, so far as my tailcoat permitted, and in part original, for I am naturally inventive, as you know. Now, I still think that for this box of matches to have escaped the wear of time for immemorial years was a most strange, as for me it was most fortunate, thing. Yet, oddly enough, I found a far unlikelier substance, and that was camphor. I found it in a sealed jar. Oh, I see we just wrapped up. We're just rolled into the next Doppler location, which is gonna be the end of this thing. So, you know what? I'm starting to mumble and bumble here, so I think we're just gonna call it right there, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Sam C. And we'll leave you with just a moment or two of Big Old Rosie. Thank you, Big Rosie.